I remember when a young Ogden asked to join the Shelmerston Silver Band. I recognised his talent immediately. He could play anything, that lad. Literally anything. Eventually he settled on the sousaphone, which he always insisted on playing with his lucky bronze mouthpiece. One evening after the Silver Band played a storming concert in the Camel, Ogden and Sally got it into their heads to go for a night swim in the harbour, young love and all that. Ogden left his mouthpiece behind, and when we came back the next morning to pack up, it had disappeared. It really rattled him. Ogden was worried he wouldn't be able to perform without it, but of course, next time we played, he was just as good as ever. Didn't need any lucky mouthpiece, our Ogden. He could play anything, that lad.
Ogden was so...
Ah! It was the day of the island cricket match out on the volcanic sandspit. We had lost to Appledore for the past 3 years, and it was my first year as captain. I didn't want another loss on my watch. Ogden had just come back from New Zealand and told me he'd be up for it. I wasn't sure. I remembered Ogden from school. He was lanky and good in the field, but batting, not sure. Ogden showed up with his own bat. He told me he'd won it in a pub in Dunedin and that it had belonged to a famous New Zealand player. I wondered whether I should put him into bat at all, but Ogden whispered to me that he'd been playing on deck all the way home. I knew Ogden wasn't a bluffer, but he was never the guy who got picked for the first team at school. Still, I had nothing to lose. Ogden hit a 6 with his first stroke. We went wild! And just when I thought it must be a fluke, he hit another, and another. He was a machine! Ogden hit so many cricket balls out into the sea that we had to stop play. We'd run out. It was a stunning win, and we carried Ogden back across the sand and into the Camel. Even though he'd won the match pretty much single-handedly, he insisted it was all down to the bat and plenty of practice.
How's that?
Hey, Morris, remember when we found one of these heavy balls on the beach and I dropped...
I missed Ogden so much, and for the first month there was no letter at all. I took my place at college on the mainland without knowing how he was feeling. It was a shock how low it made me, even though I was working with flowers, my dream job. I threw myself into making friends and working as hard as I can. The letters started arriving, and it was amazing. Each one came with a penny from a different country. One from Valparaiso, another from Dakar. I wrote back and told Ogden about my course, trips to Kew Gardens, which were amazing. And Ogden told me about his voyage, watching dolphins and flying fish, crossing the equator. Sometimes we were both lonely. We poured out our hearts to each other. In a funny way, I think the letters made us closer than ever. When he arrived in Christchurch, he'd send me flowers pressed in his letters. I sent him a shell from home, and then he sent me a New Zealand halfpenny. It was my favourite. On one side, I came back to the island, and when my father died, I opened up my own florist shop on the quay. I tucked the halfpenny under the front step for luck, polished up Ogden's sousaphone and put it in the window. They both brought me luck, and the shop flourished. One day, Ogden showed up at the shop, completely out of the blue. He told me there was nowhere like Shelmerston, and no one like me. I was so thrilled to see him, I asked him to marry me there and then. He said yes.
The Lord Yeah, one good thing about being dead, I'll never have to deal with counting change again.
They seem to have been using it as a funnel. These bootleggers are very resourceful. Yeah.
Oh, this feels so... To see you...
Well,
Ah, yes.
Oh,
Are you
I know.
Yes, I... Well...
you did...
Hey, how...
No.
Oh, yeah?
Well,
What?
that's right.
The bog... But...
Yep.
Wow.
More time.
The one part of the island I never spent much time at. I never cared for camping. Although we did find a lot of Bronze Age goods down here. Really fascinating bits and bobs. I reckon this was an important place. You know, I suppose I do like it better up here now I don't have to worry about combing all those burrs out.
Yes.
Yeah, I always...
Miles and I came to Shelmerston for the Sheller Cup final. Miles was the world champion for ages. Greg, the campsite manager, was a huge Sheller fan. Always gave us the best pitch on the campsite. Miles was up early every morning, training for the big race. Greg would always be lurking in the background, taking photos. It became rather annoying. How many photos did he need? Oh God, and one time he turned up at our barbecue and wouldn't leave. The man could not take a hint. So, race day arrives and Greg is there with his camera, of course, getting in everyone's way. So Greg leans out into the track as the pack came past, Miles in the lead. And Miles goes crashing right into Greg. Total disaster. Miles goes down and Kwasi flies past him to win the race. Miles was absolutely gutted. He definitely would have won it. Later that night, all us Shellers were on our way back from the pub and we heard Greg outside his caravan, just sat by himself, crying. Miles, he was such a good sport, went over and spoke to him, invited him over to our camp for a drink. So then Greg came back and hung out with us, brought his camera and showed us all his Sheller race photos. You know, that guy was actually a pretty great photographer. By the end of the night, Miles had forgiven him. Miles was good like that.
Shellers!
Oh, I'm getting...
I love camping. We've come to Shelmerston every summer with the kids for years. OK, our tent is a bit bright, but that means the kids can always see it. Greg seemed angry about everything this year. He told us our tent was outside of the regulation colours, and being around the kids seemed to really upset him. But they were only being kids, just running around playing. Greg was blowing that bloody whistle every 5 minutes. One day, Greg confiscated my little one's kite. He was terrifying. We still sometimes get nightmares about it. I had to do something. When I saw Greg put the whistle down, I pinched it and took out the pea. You know, the thing that makes the noise. I threw that pea somewhere Greg would never find it. You should have seen his face when he blew his whistle and nothing happened.
I always wondered how Greg man...
This...
My whole life I've dreamed of seeing a Jempson's sea owl. One day, I read the news that a guy on this little island called Shelmerson had discovered one. I had to see it. The only B&B on the island booked up really fast, so I decided to stay at the temporary campsite set up by the guy who discovered the sea owl, Greg Litherland. The atmosphere was amazing. There were twitchers from all over the world come to see it. Greg had given the owl a name, David Abrahams. A bit weird, but I guess he was the one who found it. And because it had no mate, it was lonely, and he'd made a model female owl out of concrete. That was quite impressive. I got to know Greg a bit during my stay. He really seemed to resent all the noise and fuss on the island. His island, as he thought of it. And the irony was that he was the one who'd got everyone excited about coming to Shelmerson. Greg told us he'd take us up in groups to the owl's nest site, but I snuck up early with my camera. It saw me and it flew off hooting and I didn't get a picture. I was gutted. I had to make do with a picture of the model. It wasn't the same.
I remember.
Oh, poor old Dave.
I only knew Greg briefly, from the summer that I took over the campsite and he retired. He seemed harmless enough, if a bit strange, living in that nasty little caravan. As part of his official handover process, he gave me a big box of rule books that I was apparently supposed to give every camper when they arrived. I couldn't believe them. The amount of inches apart each tent had to be, the angle of pitch, permitted colours of guy ropes. No skipping ropes, marbles, conkers or throwing games. No singing with hand drums. I built a huge fire on the beach, invited the whole site for a big party and burned the lot. But then, awkward, Greg showed up. I guess he'd been collecting some things from his caravan and came to see what the noise was all about. You could tell he wasn't comfortable, but he sat down and tried to make conversation. I told him how beautiful I thought Shelmerston was, and he started telling me all about the wildlife. He must have noticed what we were burning, but he never mentioned it. That was the last time I saw him.
Well, it's a good thing she kept one.
What's this about Doc?
My best thing is throwing discs. I am really good. I like playing with Dan and Toddler. It's our favourite thing when we go camping on Shelmerston. One time, Greg Clifferland came up the beach, all red-faced like an angry tomato. He pointed at a sign. It said, "No throwing games." He was yelling and shouting at us. He told me to give him my disc, but I wouldn't. I threw it high up into the air, and it went bang into a massive bird. Then the bird fell into the sea. I felt so awful. I never meant to hurt the bird. The whole thing was terrible. Mr. Lifferland was screaming. He waded into the sea, picked up that bird, and carried it back to the beach. He was crying and crying. I'm sorry, Mr. Lifferland.
Oh,
Woof! Okay, I've got his...
Greg! Oh, hello.
You can talk now.
Yeah, Greg.
Oh,
Wh-
you.
Well, no.
Oh, isn't it? No.
Fine.
Thanks.
It's not looking good, is it, old girl?
Don't worry, Morris. I hate it when you work.
Wait,
Yes.
Really?
No.
Hey,
Well,
Aggie sent you?
no time to.
Well,
So.
that.
I hope.
Certainly
Oh, I don't know.
Does it?
Oh,
Yes.
not